So, good afternoon. Now, this is my research defense. So, really quickly, to refresh, the topic I chose is the effect of COVID-19 shutdowns on church attendance. Now, the reason I chose this topic is that I'm concerned. Currently, less than half of the citizens of the United States consider themselves Christians, which means that church attendance is already on the decline. With that being the case, many people may see the shutdowns as another reason to refrain from going to services. For many people, church attendance is a habit, and once that habit is broken, it may be hard for people to return. Now, on the reverse, people may miss church services and flock to their worship centers as soon as they can. As part of this research, I want to see what the attendance numbers actually look like, and I want to see if there are churches that have increased their membership. Perhaps by learning what these ministers have done to bring their numbers up, church leaders who are concerned about their personal memberships can see what has worked in other places. This may be a source of hope during a pretty bleak time. So additionally, some ministers have speculated that periods of national trauma have led to an increase in church attendance numbers. For instance, some church leaders have claimed that church attendance rose during the Second World War. However, the data does not show an increase in attendance numbers. The church attendance number stayed constant at approximately 75% of Americans during the 1940s, 1950s. Then the attendance drops into the upper 60s and low 70s during the 1960s and 70s. From there, the numbers continue to decline. The uptick in population that many church leaders expect may not happen based on previous trends. So for many who say that as a result of the pandemic and as a result of the shutdowns, people are going to be returning en masse, they may be disappointed. So, now church attendance relates directly to messaging. First of all, the news media is full of conflicting messages regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. People often do not know what to believe. Depending on which station is on the television, the messaging will be different. Additionally, a lot of people get their news from social media sites. One of the primary issues with that method of knowledge gathering is that social media site content is often unedited and determined by algorithms. Since the algorithms determine the content, the people often see the same messages repeated constantly. They are not exposed to a variety of messages, which can lead people to form opinions that are shallow. When they don't see anything that conflicts with what they already believe, then they tend to form opinions without having all the facts in front of them. So, and that's a direct result of messaging and some of the communication that is currently happening as a result of this pandemic. Now, the medical community is also full of messaging about the COVID-19 pandemic. However, it seems that even the medical community cannot agree. The problem is that even though disagreement is still prevalent, commercials are appearing on television, radio, the internet, at different events. There'll be billboards. A lot of these commercials are advocating specific courses of action that advocate for everyone to follow the same path. However, popular messaging like this can often cast those who refrain from these specific actions as worthy of being ostracized. So thinking back to the idea of algorithms dictating content, when the medical community as a whole says one particular course of action should be followed, but all the content they're seeing says something different, this conflict in messaging can directly affect the attendance numbers. So this messaging directly relates to church attendance because people are deciding on levels of risk based on messages like this. At the same time, many church leaders have taken hard stances on this issue based on messaging from news outlets and medical personnel. A lot of these church leaders have chosen to share their views publicly with their congregations, and as a result, people in the congregation often take these words as the official position of their church. If people in the membership strongly disagree with the words of their leadership, they may choose to leave. Many may also choose to stay home as opposed to go somewhere else. Now, this research needs to have a mixed methodology approach. For starters, there are quantitative measures that need to be addressed. Attendance itself is a quantitative measure. Researchers need to know how many people were attending a specific church prior to the COVID-19 shutdowns. They also need to know how many people have returned since the shutdowns took place. From there, it's a simple mathematical calculation. to determine the difference. Additionally, quantitative measures will be used to develop surveys, which will determine if a church meets the sampling requirements. First of all, the survey will determine if a church was in operation prior to the COVID pandemic. Then it will determine if the church halted in-person services as a result of the shutdowns. And then finally, this particular instrument will determine if the church has since resumed in-person services. If they don't meet those three criteria, they wouldn't qualify for this study. So the final question on this initial sampling would ask if the church would like to take part in the research study. So they may meet the requirements and not want to take part. And they have that right. So if the church answers yes to all of these questions, then they will receive a second survey instrument that will have more in-depth questions. The results from those surveys will be calculated and analyzed using descriptive statistics, which can help identify trends. So this research study also needs qualitative analysis. The final question on the second survey will ask if the church leader answering the survey would like to be interviewed. For those who would like that opportunity, they will provide qualitative data that will be useful in this study. These leaders will also be given the opportunity to have the researcher visit their church should they want that to happen. Once there, the researcher will have the opportunity to observe and interact with members. The researcher will be able to evaluate the messaging and hear from individuals how the messaging has affected their decision making. The entire time, me as the researcher, I have no intention of disrupting service. I'm there purely as an observer and a fact finder. They don't need to change messaging, change anything. Everything should be business as usual. So then, since this is a mixed methodology study, there is both a philosophy and a theory incorporated into this study. So the philosophy that's being analyzed as part of this study is social constructivism. Social constructivism is focused on how people make meaning. As previously addressed, there is a variety of messaging regarding this topic as a whole. People are using this messaging to inform their decisions. However, since the interviews would take place as one of the last data points, there's no way to tell at the outset how individuals are interpreting these messages, and the way the messages are interpreted is directly linked to whether or not a person returns to their in-person services. The theory that will be applied to the study is grounded theory. As of right now, the researcher doesn't know how the attendance numbers have changed. They may have risen, they may have dropped, they may have remained the same. Additionally, the reasoning is unknown. We don't know why, at this point, some people have decided to return, others have decided not to. So, also, some may have stayed with their original churches, some may have left. We don't know why. As of right now, no one knows what the big picture looks like. So the data needs to be collected before a theory can be established here. So then, finally with this, I would love to continue this topic through my dissertation. Not only would this topic be relevant, but it's also interesting, personally interesting. Additionally, I've done some preliminary discussion with churchgoers in my community, and there are many other people besides me who have expressed interest in the findings of this study. So I expect that I would have a lot of cooperation with this project, which is always nice. Plus, I'm a member of the church community myself, so the results are of concern to me. So I want to know what the future of the church as a whole looks like. So furthermore, this project gives me the opportunity to see how this phenomenon is affecting my community. I would have the opportunity to visit many different churches and see different viewpoints. I also feel well equipped to perform this study. I've been gathering information for months. I have literature and studies to assist in building the theoretical foundation for this research study. And in nearly every course I've taken for the past 6 months has focused on some variation of this topic. As a result, I've been led to information that I would not have otherwise included. For example, I recently studied how church attendance has fluctuated over the last 70 years. Those numbers showed an alarming trend. The attendance numbers are dropping, which has led to many secondary questions such as why might this happen? In another course, I studied the impact of virtual church messaging. It was interesting to see how many ministers seem to forget that they have a virtual audience. This accidental exclusion can lead these members to drop off. Unfortunately, when virtual members drop off, a lot of them leave unnoticed. This can affect the overall health of the church. And I also want to do the study because it seems like the influence of the church in society has changed. The church has been lowered in importance as a societal institution. COVID shutdowns have only made this feeling stronger in many communities. The church was allowed to shut down as if it had the same status as Walmart. So churches closed, just like as if they were some other store or entertainment venue, as opposed to being an essential service like many other places remained open. For many who attend church with the intention of connecting with God, the church is as necessary as a hospital for them. So the societal messaging needs to change, or the church will continue to decline, which could lead to an overall continual downcline or downturn of many aspects in society. So there's my defense at this preliminary stage, and I do hope to be able to continue this topic. So thank you for listening.